Undercover boss buys breakfast. Freezes when waitress says hunger has become her daily reality. A pancake can say hello if you're patient enough to listen in silence. 6:37 a.m. The first rays of the morning sun just started shining through the dew-covered glass of a Sunrise Diner branch on the outskirts. Inside the restaurant, the soft yellow lights glowed, the coffee machine hummed, and the scent of baked butter filled the air. A man walked in, dark brown coat, cap pulled low, with the calm air of an anonymous regular. He held a small leather notebook not to take orders, but to record details the system would never display. No one in the restaurant knew that the man who had just ordered a pancake and a black coffee was Michael Carter, 50 years old, the founding CEO of the Sunrise Diner chain. And today, he wasn't there as an executive. No secretary accompanied him, no manager to give reports. He came because of the anonymous feedback that always appeared at the end of internal reports. Not sure where the tip money goes, but the server still skips breakfast. Morning shifts are always overloaded, but the main worker doesn't get their fair share. On the reports, this branch still showed green, operating smoothly. No issues detected. But Michael had learned one thing over 3 decades as an owner. What's labeled smooth can be a beautiful cover for injustice that's cleverly hidden. He didn't come to question anyone. Not yet. Today, he came to listen. A pancake, a coffee, and a look from inside the system, not through the reports. Not everyone starts their morning with a mealsome start by forcing themselves to go hungry. Emily brought out the pancake and the still steaming coffee, placing them gently on the table. A young woman, neatly dressed in uniform, hair tied up, polite smile, just like hundreds of employees Michael had hired. She smiled and turned away. Michael called softly, "Thank you, by the way. Working a morning shift like this, I bet you make pretty good tips, right?" Emily paused for a moment, just 1 second, but enough for Michael to sense the hesitation in the posture of someone trying hard to remain composed. She replied, not looking directly, "Actually, I don't have breakfast, sir. I saved the money. These past few days I've just had water and started working right away." The words were light, as if they didn't matter. As if hunger were a habit, not something unusual. Michael gripped his coffee cup slightly. The heat was still there, but a chill swept through him that he couldn't quite name. Not because a young server was working on an empty stomach, but because that truth had never appeared on any report. No one had noted, Emily didn't eat breakfast. There was no data field for, server is working while exhausted. And that was the real issue. This wasn't just a personal matter. It was a crack in the system spreading silently while no one paid attention. The truth isn't always hidden behind a door. Sometimes it's just renamed in a single line of a system. Michael didn't leave the table after his meal. He ordered another coffee not because he wanted it, but because he needed time to observe. Emily was still working. She moved smoothly between tables, taking an order at table 3, bringing extra syrup to table 1, wiping up a spilled drink at table 5, nodding thanks to every customer who came and went. No one was helping her. No one was sharing the workload. It seemed like the entire morning shift was running on Emily alone. But what caught Michael's attention most was the POS screen at the counter. Every time a customer paid and left a tip by card, only one name appeared. Zach L. Zach, the man who had been standing behind the counter all morning, crisp white shirt, headset on, busy demeanor, but he never left his spot. Never served a single table. Table 4, 3.75 tip Zach. 8:46, table 7, $5. Tip Zach. 0908, table 2, 250 tip Zach. Emily was working, but the system credited the tips to Zach. When the morning shift started to slow down, Michael pretended to get up and walk around, then headed to the back. He found Emily washing her hands near the break area. He asked gently, "Do you remember all the tables you served?" Emily looked up, then nodded softly. She pulled a thin notebook from her apron pockets. Paper cover was worn, the edges stained by sweat and time. "I wrote down every table, every tip. Because the system doesn't record my name, I don't have access to the POS." Michael opened the notebook. Every line, handwritten and steady. 7:38, table 1, tip $2.75. 8:14, table 5, tip $4. 8:57, table 6, tip $3.5. System recorded, Zach. Last page a red line, underlined, total, 3, 8 weeks. No complaints, no anger, Just numbers written down to remind herself, I did the work. I was there. I was worthy. Michael felt a tightness in his chest, not so much anger as a deep shame, because he who had set up the system to protect the real worker shed let it become a tool for those who knew how to exploit it. A system meant to recognize decency, but had forgotten how to see those who work quietly. Michael closed the notebook, but he couldn't close off what he had just read. He asked softly, still with kindness, "Did you ever talk to the manager about it?" Emily shook her head, without hesitation. "I asked just once," she said. "The system has its reasons. If you're not on the list, then there's probably a reason." The answer sounded right, but it sent a chill down Michael's spine. A system designed to be fair, but it didn't even give the frontline servers a login code. A manager who, instead of protecting staff, used an excuse to dodge responsibility. A man like Zach manipulating the system just by standing in the right spot. Michael sat there for another 10 minutes. During that time, he observed, a group of regular customers left a $6 tip after being served attentively by Emily. Zach swept by the machine, scanned the card, and his name appeared again. Emily just smiled lightly and kept wiping tables without saying anything. She was used to not being recognized. And to Michael, that was the worst part of all. He quietly opened the Notes app on his phone and typed the first line. The current POS process allows someone who doesn't serve to collect all the tips. The second line, the tip-sharing software is not transparent enough. Needs to be verified by the ID of the person serving at the tableau, the one operating the machine. In the third line, he typed more slowly, a girl named Emily has been living on faith instead of on what she actually earned. Michael knew, from that moment on, he was no longer just a CEO investigating internally. He was part of the injustice, albeit unintentionally. And precisely because of that, he had a duty to become part of the change this time, proactively. No one has the right to decide who deserves recognition. Systems exist to acknowledge and not to exclude. 9:02 a.m., exactly 1 week later. No more disguises, no more hats pulled low or brown coats. Michael Carter entered the Sunrise Diner branch dressed simply, but his gaze was steady as silent declaration. The diner was at its peak hour. The register was busy. Zach still stood behind the POS machine, as always white shirt, gleaming headset, the look of an efficient manager. The shift manager, Mrs. Tama, sat at the end of the counter, eyes scanning the delivery log, hands scribbling notes. Michael walked straight to the counter. No one could stop him as the USB was plugged into the system. The POS screen went dark, then it lit up. The first footage, Emily with her hair tied neatly, carrying a tray, set the order down at table 4. The customer smiled, nodded in thanks. A few seconds later, Zach pressed the confirmation button on the POS machine. The screen displayed 8 Thable, 44 to Pive, tip, Zach L. No Emily, no Real server ID. Second scene audio recording. Mrs. Tammy's voice, clear cold as a form template. If you want to receive tips, your name must be on the manager's approved list. No Nemeno share. The entire restaurant stopped. A few customers froze, heads lifting from their plates of pancakes. Emily, fetching water for the next table, paused mid-step. Zach furrowed his brow but stayed silent. Michael stared directly at the screen, then glanced around. The tone of his voice wasn't loud, but each word cut through the air like a blade. I didn't build Sunrise Diner for those who do honest work to live as invisible people. He turned to Zach. You didn't serve, but you're the only name that shows up. You stand behind the counter but collect every reward. Then he turned to Mrs. Tammy. You're the one entrusted with protecting fairness, yet you use that authority to filter out good people from the list. One nod. Immediately, the HR representative stepped forward, handing over 2 sealed envelopes. Zach Langley, termination of contract, effective immediately. Tammy Brooks, revocation of management rights, suspended pending investigation. Michael didn't say another word. He inserted a small device into the POS machine. The screen lit up, this time with a new message. Tip tracking, live verified vertical bar, real server, ID vertical bar, public display. The entire restaurant went silent. Michael turned back, standing at the center of the counter as if standing at the line between the old way and the new. From today on, all tips will be recorded according to the actual server. No more approved lists. No one will have to handwrite notes just to remind themselves that they're worthy. Ubzal. He looked toward Emily. She was still standing there, the tray trembling slightly in her hands. And no one should have to work hungry just because the system doesn't know how to call their name. The morning light poured through the window, illuminating the new message displayed. Tip tracking live. A new morning, a new system. And this time, a beginning where no one is left behind. At that moment in the corner of the restaurant, an older customer gently placed his knife and fork down on his plate. He stood up, walked to the counter, and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. That young woman is the reason I came back to this restaurant after my first visit. Not for the food, but because of the kindness I thought no longer existed. Applause began scattered at first, then spreading. Emily stood motionless, hands gripping the edge of her tray as if trying to steady herself, holding back the tears welling in her eyes. A young employee came up to Michael. "Mr. Carter, I used to think I wasn't good enough because I never got any tips. Turns out I just didn't have a name." Michael turned to him and to the group of staff nodding quietly behind the counter. A good system isn't one that works for the majority. It's one that also protects the very last person left behind. Immediately afterward, an internal announcement was publicly posted at every Sunrise Diner branch. New tip policy. All tips are tied to the actual server's ID. Data is displayed in real time, on site. Every employee has the right to access and check transparency. No more approved names. Only, those who do the work deserve the credit. Internal communications documented that moment. In a later viral video, Emily was shown standing in front of a whiteboard at the new employee training session, holding the same old notebook that once recorded $412.75 in hidden tips. She didn't say much. She just opened the notebook, pointed to the last page, and said, "Nothing hurts more than having to write things down just to remember that you exist." But today, she no longer needs to keep notes. Her name is now exactly where it belongs. And behind her, the whole system now operates on a new principle. No one is left behind just because they didn't know how to speak up. Fairness doesn't just appear on its own. It needs to be nurtured by those who were once forgotten but never gave up. 1 month later, Sunrise Diner, the branch where the old story happened, still opens at 6 a.m. every day. But something has changed. Not in the lighting and not in the menu, but in the way everything operates clear, transparent, and right. The POS screen behind the counter now shows real-time updates. A-05, table 4350, tip Carla. 817, table 2, 4.5 tip, Nathan. Table 5, 2.75 tip, Jenny. No more approved ID. No more handwritten notes just to prove you were there. Emily no longer rushes between tables. She stands in the training room of the newly opened branch, simple shirt, calm voice. In front of her are 7 new employees. In her hand, the same old notebook, now wrapped in a thin leather cover, like a special teaching tool. She opens to the last page where the same red line from years ago still remains. Total, 412.75 3 weeks. This is the amount I didn't receive. But what I lost wasn't just money. It was the feeling that my efforts had disappeared. A brief silence. Then she spoke, softly but clearly. If one day the system doesn't call your name, do your job so well that it has no choice but to fix itself to call you by name. Another morning, on the same familiar table where Michael once sat, no banners, no spotlights, just a plate of pancakes, a cup of black coffee, and a folded $20 bill, placed beneath a small piece of paper with a familiar slanted handwriting. "Thank you for holding on to what's right, even when it meant you couldn't live right." Emily found the note after her shift. She didn't cry, but when she folded it up and tucked it into her old notebook, her hand trembled slightly, as if she had just touched a promise kept after a long, weary winter. 1 week after Emily received that note, the Sunrise Diner branch continued its operations with a new rhythm. Not flashy, but steady and quietly right. Among the morning customer flow, a small bulletin board was placed beside the POS machine. Live tip tracking. Transparent, verified, server-based. Below that line was a small QR code. Customers could scan it to view the tip-sharing history per transaction, per server, per table. A gentle, yet undeniable reminder. Fairness now had a face and a verification link. One late afternoon, in the company's conference room, Michael Carter entered the routine executive meeting. He brought only one item, not a revenue report, nor a growth plan slide, but Emily's old notebook. He placed it in the center of the large glass table. "We once thought fairness was an algorithm, but it starts here from a handwritten page. From someone who once fell silent among the numbers. You're due. And then, after 15 minutes of silence, he made a decision. Every new Sunrise Diner branch would have an Emily station, a place to keep a transparent tip tracking board and a printed copy of the original notebook as a public commitment that real workers would never be hidden. A system might be called modern, but only if it knows how to call the right names of the people building it every day with their hands, with their sweat, with unwavering trust. Kindness is not an optional feature. It is the foundation of trust, of performance, and ultimately of human dignity. Because you might not remember every employee, but if the system you build can't recognize the person who served this morning's breakfast, then what you need to rewrite is not the algorithm, but the conscience of an employer